Well, good morning with the people in the other side of the world from Latin America, and good evening to the people that are in this part of the Pacific in Latin America. My name is David Romo, and I'm an emeritus professor from Universidad San Francisco de Quito. And I'm the former director of the Ethnic Diversity Program, which was the program for ethnic inclusion at Universidad San Francisco de Quito. I will be your host for this conference and the other series of conference, if at all possible. And I want to thank you all for participating in this conference tonight and this morning. And it is my enormous pleasure to introduce to you our speaker, Dr. Raymundo Rovillos, from the University of the Philippines Baguio. Um, I am very honored to have him here because one of the things that I was very impressed going over his life history is the fact that he's been the chancellor for the university from 2012 to 2021. And as you can probably understand, having that kind of responsibility over his shoulders implies that he is a person that oversees for the well-being of everybody at the university. And from what I have been able to share with him over these years that I've known him, he's always concerned about the well-being of the people around him, and that's what makes him especially a very marvelous person. Um, uh, Ray, as I call him, it's outside of Manila in a location where internet is not very stable. And that's the reason why the first part of his presentation will be a pre-recorded version of his presentation. And after we finish that pre-recorded version, we will be rejoining with Ray and also with Rozel Balmores-Paulino, who is an associate professor at the psychology department at the University of Baguio of the Philippines. And she is now also the coordinator of Indigenous Studies Program. Uh, for you to understand why this is so important, Ray, it's responsible for the creation of that program. And he's also responsible for several strategies in the Philippines that have been critical in the advancement of recognition of indigenous rights and indigenous people's development and in solving indigenous problems. And that's why he's invited over and over to talk about this and act as mediator and do several things. His life is a very impressive example for all indigenous people and people interested in indigenous issues of how a person in a country can serve from academia to change the situation in a country like the Philippines and over the borders. So I thank you, both of you, for being with us tonight, and I will let you do a short hello, and then David will probably plug in the presentation. So, before I forget, please, to the audience out there, do write your questions on the chat, and we have two people that are checking on your questions, and we'll try to summarize your questions at the end and try to answer them all. And I truly encourage you to not just ask about the issues that are being presented, but in our effort, the main effort of this chat is to help people, indigenous people around the world, to understand the kinds of issues that each country is facing and how those issues are being solved and how people like Ray and Rozel are working on an everyday basis to solve those issues. And hopefully by having these conversations and the seminars, we will be able to have a joint view and a joint strategy all around the world to help the preservation and production and concerns about indigenous people. So I'm going to quiet now and let both Rozel and Ray introduce a little bit, say hello to the audience.
Hi, thank you very much, Professor David, for that very generous and heartfelt introduction. Obviously, you did not read, you chose not to read the prepared, very long, rather lengthy bio note that I presented, which I really appreciate because it means that the introduction comes from your heart, being my constant and frequent companion in our APRU Indigenous Knowledge Networks during coffee breaks, dinner breaks, and conversations on the side or inside during our workshops. So, muchas gracias, mi amigo. Buenos días, aquí en Filipinas. Buenas noches, in Latin America. Good morning, everyone. As mentioned by my friend David, I am not in my home base right now. I am in an island called Panay Island because of a special assignment by our Commission on Higher Education chairperson to head the search for the new president of a local state university here. And because I was anticipating that the power connection here might not be stable, I prepared a pre-recorded presentation the other day, so please don't mind the change in my attire from that video because I did not, of course, did not repeat the same attire. I guess so that's the context. Now, I will see you again live after the very short, about 35 to 39-minute pre-recorded presentation. Thank you very much. Rozel, can you say something a bit about Rozel here, my companion here is the current head of the Indigenous Studies Program at the University of the Philippines Baguio. And she will be joining me during the open forum because she would know more about the latest updates in the program, the issues that we're facing, being the current head of that program. Say hi, Rozel.
Hi, good morning from the city of Baguio, Philippines. As Prof. Rovillos mentioned, I'm here also, of course, to support his presentation and at the same time to, if there are any questions or issues regarding, let's say, the more administrative aspect of the program, I'd be happy to share with you our experience. Thank you.
Hi, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, regardless of your time zones now. Good day, everyone. I would like to thank the Indigenous Knowledge Network of the Association of Pacific Rim Universities for this opportunity to be part of this global lecture forum or lecture series on Indigenous Studies. My topic for this morning is Institutionalizing Indigenous Studies in Higher Education, the case of the University of the Philippines, Baguio. I have the following objectives for this presentation. First is to narrate UP Baguio's or the University of the Philippines Baguio's journey towards the establishment of Indigenous Studies Program, to assess initially the implementation of the program, to reflect on key lessons learned, and to identify ways forward. Now, let me show you first where we are located. The University of the Philippines Baguio is the 7th constituent unit of the University of the Philippines system. No? So as you know, UP is located geographically in different parts of the country, including an open university, a constituent university. So there are now 8 campuses
all over, major campuses all over the country. And UP Baguio is located in the city of Baguio in Benguet here, which is nestled in the Cordillera mountain range. That's the colored part of that map on the northern Luzon here. And this is a region, the Cordillera region, is populated by at least 8 major ethno-linguistic groups or indigenous peoples. That's our location. Now, we are basically located in indigenous peoples region or territory. The University of the Philippines Baguio has this vision and mission, and I would like to mention this because it is important that to mention that the establishment of the Indigenous Studies Program is aligned to or anchored on the mission and vision and goals of the University of the Philippines Baguio. So the vision is stated this way: a sustained lead position in the delivery of tertiary education in the North. It will continue to nurture and develop innovative programs in the arts and sciences. It will also continue to develop the niche it has created over the past decades in Cordillera studies. Our mission is to spearhead the offering of the highest standard of education and to contribute to the overall upgrading of the quality of instruction in the region. We seek to create an impact by informing our programs with a regional perspective at the same time that these are informed by a national and global outlook. Before we decided to establish the Indigenous Studies Program at UP Baguio, there were other previous programs that would lead us to where we are now. As mentioned earlier, UP Baguio, being located in an indigenous region or territory, had always considered or aligned its programs in the service of the region, which happens to be populated by indigenous communities. We call them indigenous communities now, but they were called in various names in the past, which I will discuss later on. So this is, for me, it's really, it was a matter of destiny, I think, or a matter of relevance that we are creating, or we have decided to create an Indigenous Studies Program and its precursors in the past. Like we had the Educational Assistance Program in the 70s and 80s. This program was a program that sought to give assistance, academic, psychosocial, and other forms of assistance to indigenous peoples who are entering the University of the Philippines Baguio. We call that the EAP, or the Educational Assistance Program. It was a measure to democratize access to education to UP and to privilege indigenous students to enter UP by adjusting the admission test result, the average, or what we call the upcut results, in such a way that it can be accommodating to indigenous students, especially in the Cordillera region. In 1985, we established the Cordillera Studies Center. This was an area studies concept. It was guided by the idea of area studies because we felt that UP Baguio, being located in the region of the Cordillera region, we wanted to conduct researches and publications and extension programs for the region and to the region. Okay, so since 1985 up to the present, we have been producing knowledge, or advancing knowledge about the region and publishing them. And now we have journals, blind reviewed journals, the Cordillera Review. And UP Baguio became popular, became known nationally and internationally because of this Cordillera Studies Center that we have. And then we also started mainstreaming indigenous studies or indigenous peoples in the curriculum in the 90s, no? And this was proven by a study that we conducted where we tried to assess how the various disciplines and programs of the university is tackling indigenous topics or issues or themes in their curriculum. And we found out that at least 80% of the courses in the social sciences and the humanities had topics in various levels, various degrees. It could be a subject matter, it could be a whole curriculum in their discipline or their program. Okay. We also even had, even in the natural sciences and mathematics, some topics of indigenous studies were already being tackled since the 1990s. And then in 2002, we established the Program for Indigenous Studies or Indigenous Cultures. This one here, this the PIC or Program for Indigenous Cultures replaced the Educational Studies Program. Now, we no longer have special admission grades, no, for indigenous communities since 2002, because increasingly students were passing the UPCAT and there was no more need to treat them really in a different way as the other non-indigenous as the other non-indigenous students coming to UP Baguio. So I mentioned earlier that the Cordillera Studies Center, being the research center of the university, although it started really as a research center of the College of Social Sciences, but when we became a constituent unit in 2002, it was elevated as a university research center. We did a study, a content analysis on the studies, researches, both published and unpublished, under the auspices of the Cordillera Studies Center, and we tried to tease out what terminologies, how were the people or inhabitants in the Cordillera region named or identified or labeled by these academic studies. No? And we found out this was the result. No? So they were called or labeled in various ways. No? They were either referred to as native, simply as respondents, as Igorots, as Cordillera or Cordillerans, or they were referring to a specific name of the ethno-linguistic group, no, like Ibaloy or Kankanaey or Kalinga or Ifugao or Tuwali or the other more specific ethno-linguistic groups. Lowlanders or Highlanders dichotomy, traditional versus Christian beliefs or practitioners, migrants versus non-migrants, ethnic or ethno-linguistic groups, indigenous peoples, no mention of any group, there are others missing, and there are missing copies. It's a significant number. Okay. So, as you can see, there is no singular terminology to refer to the thing that's being, or the subject matter of academic studies in the Cordillera Administrative Region. Even up to now, although we can say that indigenous peoples has become the more popular and dominant one, there's still no single dominant or no single category to refer to the people that we engage with as researchers in the Cordillera Administrative Region. Now, in the Philippines, indigenous peoples have been defined legally, by the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act in 1997, and this is how they are defined. Indigenous peoples refer to a group of people or homogeneous societies identified by self-ascription and ascription by others who have continuously lived as organized community on communally bounded and defined territory, and who have, under claims of ownership since time immemorial, occupied, possessed, and utilized such territories, sharing common bonds of language, customs, traditions, and other distinctive cultural traits, or who have, through resistance to political, social, and cultural inroads of colonization, non-indigenous religions and cultures became historically differentiated from the majority of Filipinos. Now, I mentioned that this is the legal national definition, but of course this has also been contested and debated on, especially by academics, and even by indigenous peoples themselves. So it's also a contested definition and categorization, but well, this is the working definition for now. Okay, whether it's we agree with it or not, so we're using this for now because this is the commonly accepted definition, both internationally and locally, at least in the legal parlance. Now, how did we start? When did we start talking about the idea of ethnicity or indigenous studies? In the Philippines, I mentioned ethnicity, or in UP. I mentioned ethnicity because at the beginning we were not really sure about what category to use, whether is it going to be indigenous studies or ethnicity studies. Part of our own, journey, into this field, because we were debating, the academic community was debating on what to use. So in January 30 to 31, 2006 or 26, or 2006, sorry. In January 30 to 31, 2006, we had the UP Baguio Faculty Conference, where the topic was what's our niche, as a constituent university of the University of the Philippines system. What do we want to be known for? What is our identity as a campus, as a constituent university? And one of the topics that were proposed and deliberated was discussed during that time, and I was assigned to do a presentation on this paper. Part of a panel was on the idea of indigenous or ethnicity studies. So as early as 2006, we already identified indigenous studies or ethnicity studies as our focus, or our niche as a constituent university. So we had this was followed by a roundtable discussion on ethnicity studies with the Department of Education, organized by the Cordillera Studies Center in 2008. Okay, let me just now run you through this chronology. And in 2013, we participated in an international seminar workshop on indigenous studies. This was participated by various indigenous scholars, activists, and advocates on indigenous people's rights. In fact, this was dominantly participated in by indigenous people's rights activists who also happened to be academics. So this was co-organized by UP Baguio with Tebteba Foundation, which is an international research center on indigenous studies, headed by Executive Director Victoria Tauli Corpus, who became who became the special rapporteur on indigenous peoples issues or rights at the United Nations. So this was the workshop, and this workshop produced a book entitled "Unsettling Discourses: The Theory and Practice of Indigenous Studies." So this is the proceedings, the 2013 International Seminar Workshop on Indigenous Studies. In September 26-27, 2013, we had a UP system-wide conference on internationalization held at the city of Baguio, okay? And the group from UP Baguio at that time, composed of deans and vice chancellors, positioned and identified indigenous studies as a platform towards internationalization. And I remember during this workshop that we specifically mentioned that we wanted to be an active member of the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, being a very prestigious network of universities in the region, and our entry point, you might say, as a constituent unit of the UP system was going to be through indigenous studies, and we strongly felt that it is through indigenous studies that we can contribute to internationalization, discourse, and also advancing indigenous knowledge, and the indigenous people's rights at the international arena, because of our track record on knowledge production here in the Cordillera region and in the Philippines in general. So I guess what I'm saying is that this dream or this vision has become a reality now that UP Baguio is an active member, in fact one of the founding members of the Indigenous Knowledge Working Group of the Association of Pacific Rim Universities. And we thank also the UP administration for allowing this to happen. So this was the conference. The president then was UP President Alfredo E. Pascual, who is now the Secretary of Department of Trade and Industry in the country. We also had a very successful international conference on indigenous studies, participated in by 600 scholars from all over the country. And we had esteemed scholars internationally and nationally who participated in this international conference organized by our Cordillera Studies Center. So all of these were leading towards this direction, towards really cementing our niche in indigenous studies. And we thought that, we felt that we can never claim to be the center or the leader in indigenous studies in the region and in the country if we didn't have an academic program that will sustain it, academic program that can be an opportunity to disseminate knowledge that we have generated over the years through teaching. So why indigenous studies? Why a PhD in indigenous studies? Well, these were the reasons. There was an expressed interest and clamor for it, especially from outside UP Baguio. UP Baguio has already substantially mainstreamed indigenous studies topics, themes, and content in the existing curriculum, both baccalaureate and masteral programs. And we had a pool of faculty with PhDs from the three colleges, the College of Social Sciences, College of Arts and Communications, and College of Science at UP Baguio, who could teach courses on Indigenous studies. A doctoral program would cement our niche in Indigenous studies, and it was responsive to the UP mandate as specified in the 2008 Charter, which is to develop or offer graduate programs in order to increase human capital amongst Indigenous peoples and in the country as a whole. But the frequently asked questions that still actually can't continue to unsettle us, to confront us, are these two questions. Aren't we guilty of objectifying and merely using Indigenous peoples to advance our academic careers and institutional reputation? Now, that's a tough question. Another question is, how do we ensure the participation of Indigenous peoples in the proposed Indigenous Studies program? Okay, I cannot say that we have fully answered these questions and we are satisfied with our responses to these questions. But I just want to put this out there that it's a continuing conversation amongst us, amongst Indigenous communities and Indigenous people's advocates and activists even, and other stakeholders. Okay, so we are conscious of these issues, and we continuously grapple with this both within the program and outside of it. So the Indigenous Studies doctoral program is defined. Well, first of all, I would like to mention that the Indigenous Studies program proposal was approved by our Board of Regents in April 2021. And so we started accepting students during the first semester of 2021, academic year 2021 and 2022, in September 2021. And we had already 29 students as our first batch of students at the program. It has been increasing over the years. I think we have more than 45 students now, I believe. Yeah, and okay. But how do we define Indigenous Studies? Indigenous Studies is a field of inquiry that focuses on Indigenous people. It employs interdisciplinary perspectives in engaging historical and contemporary issues confronting Indigenous peoples in the Philippines and elsewhere. And it seeks to valorize Indigenous epistemologies or ways of knowing that have been neglected and marginalized by hegemonic scientific epistemologies. So note that at the beginning, it is positioned, it cannot claim to be neutral because it's really biased for the advancement of Indigenous people's knowledge, given that historically these knowledges and epistemologies have been marginalized by dominant hegemonic knowledge systems. So these are the program goals. At the end of the program, graduates will be grounded in the theories and frameworks to conduct research, publish, implement programs on Indigenous issues, or teach. Specifically, graduates can synthesize the core issues, problems, concerns, and visions of Indigenous peoples, the nature, elements, and parameters, as well as the theoretical, methodological, interdisciplinary approaches, and ethical considerations to Indigenous studies, produce knowledge that will benefit Indigenous peoples and the rest of the community, and utilize knowledge through policy advocacy, development programs and projects, education and information campaigns, and or other knowledge products and forms of actions that will positively impact Indigenous peoples or communities. So so this is the current program structure. So we have courses, 9 units, core courses, 9 units, major courses, 19, electives, 9, dissertation, 12, for a total of 49 units. So these are the courses, the title of courses under core courses. We have Indigenous Studies, Indigenous Knowledge, and Indigenous Research Methodologies. For the major courses, these are the course titles. We have directed readings in world ethnographies, historical construction of being and becoming indigenous, perspectives on indigenous languages, indigenous management of resources, special topics on indigenous studies, research in indigenous studies, and research seminar in indigenous studies. And we have the dissertation, 12 units. So in terms of the social demographic profile of our Indigenous Studies Program students, this is what we have based on our current data. We have out of the total of 45 students, we have 51% are males, 49% are females. 45% are married, 55 are single. Unfortunately, we don't have an ethnically disaggregated data. That's really, I would say, I'm embarrassed to mention this, that we have not been able to disaggregate our own data in terms of ethnicity. That's the age distribution of our students, frequency distribution. So they would range from 24 years old to 59 years old. But we do have distribution by birthplace of students. Okay, so we can only maybe although this is not ethnicity ethnically based or ethnicity based regions, we can see the distribution of students by virtue of their birthplace. So I'm happy to say that we have students from all over the country, from north to south. And however, we still don't have many indigenous students from other countries. I think we only have one or two. So this is how our own students are assessing or have assessed the program or the feedback. We ask them what has worked, and these are the responses. One says that I think the course content, assessment strategies, program requirements, and faculty complement work best. Faculty complement work best among the given aspects of the program. There's the great curriculum, albeit very few actual interactions with indigenous communities. Well-balanced faculty, maybe they're referring to the interdisciplinary composition of our faculty. In terms of course content, there were new insights and learnings that I have slowly understood. Let me correct that. In relation to the course delivery, it caters to our needs. Who works full-time? So the blended mode of learning were very much favorable. In terms of faculty complement, they are equipped with the skills and are commendable for their knowledge and delivery of the course content. Now, these are comments that would, comments identifying what needs to be improved or what still doesn't work at the moment. No? One student said that I think that the instruction and the way it is delivered should improve in a way that requires more tactile and practical measures such as immersion. Okay. What does not work or issues that need to be addressed by the program? They said that there are unclear, confusing guidelines. For example, dissertation procedures and publication requirement. they seem to be confused about what should really be done because up to now we have not really disseminated the handbook for the students of the program. They're still operating on guidelines, series of guidelines being issued by the program, not a comprehensive one yet. There is also an issue about the assessment of students' outputs. They are wondering how they are graded. So maybe there's need for more transparency, I guess, for some faculty to show and discuss with the students how they got their grades. And there is also this issue about the result of comprehensive exams because the current practice in the university is that the results of the exams are not returned to the students. And there's been a demand, a clamor on the first batch of students who took the comprehensive exams to return to them their exams, because they even went to the extent of saying this is nothing like, this is like a continuing extraction of indigenous knowledge, because we don't return to the students their own examination results. So this is something that the program has to really consider and reflect on whether to return the comprehensive exams or not. So the following are recommendations by the students based on the survey that we did 2 months ago. So they say that there has to be clear guidelines on the course requirements, particularly on the dissertation procedure, disseminate the ISP student handbook for consensus guidance, transition to PhD by research with less or no coursework. Some courses may be good but irrelevant to the dissertation of the students. Some courses should be combined. Add more practical and tactile components like immersion, fieldwork, etc. Offer more opportunities to continue to partner with other universities, knowledge sharing on indigenous worldviews, e.g. Native American Studies, Maori Studies, etc. And the program should offer more elective courses. Okay, so those are the recommendations by our students. We will have a more comprehensive review of the program in the coming years, or soon. I think after 5 years, we should have this regular review of the program, especially after we have produced the first batch of graduates of the program. So for my concluding remarks, okay, I would say first, this is my personal reflections on our Indigenous Studies program. Although it's really commendable that we are the first campus in the entire country, and I guess also in the region, in the Southeast Asian region, to offer a doctoral degree on Indigenous Studies. I would say that the program is still being conducted in the framework of traditional university system, which is, of course, we know a quite a Western institution. For those of us or friends and colleagues in the indigenous movement, of course, it's not something that is true, not yet, no? I mean, I would say that the Indigenous Studies program at UP Baguio is still working within the framework of traditional university system, admission exams, admission test requirements, comprehensive exams, the traditional way of teaching it through syllabi and courses and all of that, outcomes-based education and all of that. So it has limits being offered in that modality within the framework of the traditional university system. But this is just one way, of doing indigenous studies. I know that this is not the only way to do it. I have there are other programs in the university in the Philippines, like the Pamulaan program in the south, where it is really run by indigenous peoples themselves. It is dominantly indigenous knowledge and living tradition that is being taught in these universities or colleges. So that is something that can also be considered maybe in this series of discussions. And I say this because there are constraints or limits already, given the fact that we are offering the Indigenous Studies program in the framework of the traditional Western influence institutions like the University of the Philippines system. But having said that, I think that it is already, for me, an advancement of indigenous rights in the academe, indigenous knowledge systems in the academe, because we will have to confront these dominant institutions anyway, within its own arena, within its own, within the limits, within the system itself. In other words, within the system itself, and we know that there are constraints there. There are limitations, as I mentioned, but I would like to argue that this is just one way of doing it. We have to consider other ways of advancing indigenous knowledge in the framework of a more pluralistic approach at the global and national level. So I will end with that remarks. We can entertain questions after this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Raymundo, for your presentation. And we have a very short time for questions right now. So I have a couple of questions of my own, but before doing that, I want to throw a question by Freddy Grefa. And he wants to know what was the constraint or what it's the reason why the program it's not including or putting the indigenous entering the indigenous people territories in order to do the program. So it's kind of like it's in university, but you're not going towards the indigenous peoples. And to make one shot of questions, mine are kind of short. For people that might be interested on the program, is the program being conducted in English? So it promotes international students, and is there support for international students to come to the program? So those are three questions there.
Yeah, thank you, David. Okay, for the first question, the main limits, the main constraints as to more interaction with indigenous communities is really resources, time, and financial resources. Because I tried to do this in my own research methodology class, where I had a project in the South, and I invited my class. They were only very few, but I thought that they were going to, they can easily join me in one of my field trips over the weekend there. But they said that they could not make it because they come from all over different parts of the country, and it would be costly. It would be costly for them to be able to join me, because it will mean, taking the plane and, these expenses. And the university, our university don't have the resources for that. Or if we do, it's very limited. So that's one limitation. The other limitation is really the time, because most of them are also working full-time. They have day jobs. So it would be they would, you know, they would they will be absent from their day jobs if they will be away for 2 or 3 days in the field. So the intention for greater interaction is really there, but the resources. But I was hoping that that the dissertation, their own dissertation program, research, which is 12 units, will allow them individually to interact with our indigenous communities where they are most proximate to or nearer in their own home bases. That's the main limitation. Maybe Rozel can add to that. The second question first. What was the second question again? Is it taught?
Resources.
The medium of instruction, David, is English. So yeah, it's mainly in English. And so we can attract, it's, you know, it's friendly to the English-speaking people, our peoples. And then the third one is about
Scholarships.
scholarships. Unfortunately, we don't have scholarship for foreign students. Maybe that's something that we can we should be working on through linkages, perhaps. Yeah, again, the goal, the objective is there, but we still have to put the resources in place for that to happen, really.
Okay, you did a very good job at answering. So I have questions that might be for Rozel or you. How do you think, or what do you think as a former chancellor of your university? Is private or is
The state university. It's public. It's owned by the state.
I thought that. Okay, so what do you think about the creation of indigenous universities? And that's both for you and Rozel. So I would like to hear that, because I have my own view, but in this country, we don't have, as far as I know, we don't have any university offering indigenous studies. That's not something that's happening. But we do have a private university that offers indigenous programs or social sciences programs geared towards indigenous students. And then there's a university now that it's open university that it's indigenous. So the people that are hired to teach that are indigenous, or they try to do that as much as indigenous people, but it's meant just for indigenous students.
Yeah. A purely indigenous university or an institution is, I think, it's an option by indigenous peoples trying to determine their self-determined development. In fact, as I said earlier, there is already one case that we can look at in Mindanao, the Pamulaan Institute, which is an initiative of a non-government organization, the Assisi Foundation, in partnership with a University of Southern Mindanao. There they really allow their teachers, their instructors are indigenous knowledge bearers. They really advance indigenous knowledge and living tradition, really deviating from the standard university curriculum. That's something that we can look into. So it's an option. But let me tell you my opinion on this. I have been interacting with indigenous leaders, development planners, indigenous communities themselves. And in fact, they would tell you also that while they also want their knowledge systems to be promoted and preserved, they also want their youth to learn skills that will allow them employment in the greater society. Like they want to be nurses, also engineers, teachers. Again, it's an option for them. We can offer various options. We can have one type of university that's really indigenous university or tribal university, but there should also be options for some students, indigenous students, to pursue courses that will allow them to participate, in the mainstream society, because they also don't want to be isolated, from the mainstream society. They don't want to be ghettoized as something really, as a group that's really different from the rest of us, because they also have needs like the rest of us. They also have notions of good life that they share with many of us in mainstream society.
So I have one more question from one of the people in our audience. Rebecca is asking if the program contemplates African indigenous communities as part of the study program.
Yeah, thank you. The program, Rebecca, is designed in such a way that you define your community as a student. We guide you through your coursework. It is neutral in the sense of specific cultures or territories, because while we do offer or deliver lectures that we feel that the students should have grasp on, or basic concepts and methodologies, but yeah, of course, we are open to the global indigenous community as a program.
Okay, as juicy and wonderful that this time with you has been, it comes to the end. And I have to thank both of you for participating, and thank you, Rozel, for being the support for Ray. And it just goes one more step into my admiration, because you were making certain that nothing fails on this delivery. I look forward to the next time that we see each other and have our very exciting and side-dish conversations. And I want to thank everybody for participating. And I know that this is the moment when David will project the card. And I want everybody to know that our next conference will be on July 26th for the people in the morning, I'm sorry, for the people in this part, in my heck of the world, in the Latin America, and 27 for the people in Asia, in the rest of the Pacific Rim. And it will be by Professor Ana Luisa Muñoz from University Católica de Chile, and the colonial feminist debate to think of academic knowledge. It will be the topic of that conversation. So please let your friends know that these are very interesting topics, and I hope that we keep having a greater number of people attending our seminars. Thank you, Adriana and David, for all your support.